if you do want to meet your needs in a consensual, wonderful way in this world, it's going to require some level of courage. It took courage to DM Emilia and ask if she was in a relationship. It took courage to send her the first audio message. It took courage to ask her to be with me.
You're trying to get consent that your partner is going to meet them. And what happens if they don't, right? That then will shake that belief system to the core of, am I important enough to have my needs met by my partner? Do my needs even matter in this big old world that we live in? Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast for episode 154. One reason your needs are not being met. Before we jump into this episode, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions. We work directly and indirectly with 66 podcasters at this stage. That is the production company that produces this show, Next Level University, Podcast Growth University. Thank you, production team, for all the good that you do to spread personal growth, mental health awareness, self-improvement, personal development into the world. If you want to start, grow, scale, or monetize a podcast, reach out to my business partner, Kevin at nextleveluniverse.com. He is the pilot and person of interest in the podcast space. And he works very closely with the amazing NLPS team. So thank you, NLPS team. Okay, sweetheart. So before we jump into this episode, it's always ladies first. What is your intention for today?
So our listeners have needs. They got a lot of needs. And our listeners need those needs to get met. And it is my intention to illuminate those needs. No, it's my intention to illuminate what those needs are, but ultimately to have an understanding of how courage, specifically, the embodiment of courage and how it connects to getting our needs met.
So our goal in this episode is to see how many times we can say needs. No, I'm kidding.
And courage
and needs.
Yeah.
Okay. So last night we had our Relationship Talks virtual event. And for those of you who did not attend, how dare you?
You missed out, man.
We're being playful. But we did have quite the attendance, so thank you everyone who did come. I know it's 5 o'clock. Some of you are still at work. Some of you couldn't attend.
People were coming in from all over the world. We had some new people joining. It was wonderful.
Yes. Shout out to Jacqueline and Richard. First names only, but shout out to them.
Whoop.
Okay. And anyone who does want to be a part of the Conscious Couples community, we have a private WhatsApp group. Reach out to Emilia or myself. We can get you in there. And you'll get the slides from those events, even if you miss the event. So the events are private. They are not recorded. However, the slides that we're going to be talking about today are sent in the Conscious Couples WhatsApp group. I know one of my clients was super excited to get them.
Yeah, that's cute. Shout out you.
Shout out to Andrew. Shout out you.
Shout out you.
Shout out to Andrew. He listens to CCP and NLU.
Nice.
And he said, I'm so sad I'm going to be working.
Oh.
And I said, brother,
you should be sad.
You got brother, it's understandable. It is at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And you work your face off all the time. So shout out to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So at the event, there was one slide in particular. Emilia and I, before this episode, we asked ourselves, what was the most powerful part of the event? Because that's what these event recaps are about. And she had mentioned a story that I told that I didn't anticipate sharing, but I think it's kind of a playful, funny one that I should share. Okay. So when I was in my mid-20s, I used to go to a place called Pins. This is a place in Massachusetts that was sort of one of those bowling alley / clubs / bars, sports bar / they have a DJ.
Don't go to the back.
You know it. So I was quite the bowler. No, but it was a sports bar. Yeah, bowler, in quotes. They used to have a DJ every Saturday night. And this is long before I met Emilia.
Fun.
And my friends and I would go on Saturday nights to the club. Now, they also had a ping pong table, babe.
Fun.
They also had a pool table. It was actually pretty awesome.
Cool.
Okay, so late Saturday night, DJ comes and we're bumping.
Fun.
My buddy Kiki and I, he's a stud, good-looking guy, and also a little bit of a coward. And I don't think he'd mind me sharing this on here. There were girls checking him out, and I saw them checking him out, and he is very fearful of asking a girl to dance. And I said, hey, and this is long before I met Emilia, I said, brother, you're not getting any younger. They're not always going to look at you like they are.
Aww.
And you're a stud. Like, let's go ask these girls to dance. They want to dance. It's obvious that they want to dance.
Yeah.
And he said, no, man, I'm good. No. I said, dude, what's the worst that could happen? And he immediately turned to me, and he loves The Grinch too, so he does the impression well. The Jim Carrey, The Grinch, is one of our favorite movies growing up together. And he said, I could die. I will not do it. And
I could die.
Laughed my ass off. I think we went back to playing ping pong.
That's hilarious.
But I tell that story because what we're trying to connect here is, and I don't know, I haven't talked to Kiki in a long time. Emilia met Kiki once, but Kiki was never one to have the courage to go and ask a girl to dance, never mind ask her on a date, ask her to be with him type of thing. And I don't know, I haven't touched base on it in a long time, but one thing is very clear. He had a lot less fun and a lot less adventure and a lot less opportunities to meet an intimate partner than if he had more courage.
Right.
And he might still be alone today, I'm not sure. And again, not here to judge Kiki. But what we will say to this principle, regardless of Kiki and that funny story, is that if you don't have courage, you're not going to be able to meet your needs nearly to the extent of someone who does have courage. So what is courage?
Yeah.
And I said this in the event. I said courage is not a lack of fear. Courage is, I admit that I'm afraid, and I'm going to lean into courage and share this anyway, or ask this girl to dance anyway, or DM this woman named Emilia Smith and ask her if she's in a relationship like I did. I unsent the message several times because I was too cowardly to ask, and I didn't want to be a homewrecker. And for some reason, her Facebook said in a relationship.
Well, I was in a relationship with myself.
Which was a bold-faced lie to repel any such men from DMing you. Luckily, it didn't repel me. And totally understandable, by the way. But for the point of this episode, sweetheart, this one slide got asked about at the event.
Yeah.
And it's definitely the slide that I was most intrigued by that you had created.
It was called the Rainbow Slide, and shout out to Bonnie who had asked about it. So one of the things, that story that you mentioned, it was not only super entertaining in the event because everyone can imagine an experience like that where they, have a moment right in front of them where they can have their needs met, for lack of better words, right? And in that moment for you and Kiki, it was having attention, receiving validation. It was
having fun,
having a space to belong, having fun, getting attuned with certain people, experiencing novelty, right? There's so many different needs that are being met and or addressed right there in that moment.
Love, belonging,
right?
Intimacy.
But if you don't
touch.
have the ability to override the fear, which is what that courage is and what that bravery is, and we mentioned this in the event, there's many different forms of courage, and courage looks very different because of the different types of it, and how you experience fear is different for every single person. Your way in which you experience and deploy courage is going to look absolutely different than the person next to you. But you can't get those needs met and or have a partner, in this case, we were talking about it in the event in that context, have your partner meet your needs without using courage as the vessel to meet those needs. So the rainbow slide essentially represented that the deployment of courage, it's a lot easier said than done because of what you just mentioned. There's fear that our needs won't get met when we go and deploy that. So for example, the rainbow slide had, and I have it here on my phone, essentially to have courage not only is let me face one fear. of maybe, let's say, not being validated or being rejected. But it's also facing a multitude of different fears that you've accumulated throughout your life of when you go and try to have that courageous moment to experience a need for tenderness, to experience a need for justice and consistency with other people, to experience and have the need of humility be met by other people, to have peace, respect, empathy, emotional regulation, safety, and belonging. So when you're having a moment of courage, it's not just one fear that you're overcoming. And it's the fear of not having a multitude of needs not being met that we often meet in the face of courage. And that's why it's easier said than done, because we don't realize how many fears are actually being faced in that one moment.
Well, in this moment, I'm actually reflecting back on this, and I realize now why he was so afraid. And this is, again, my hypothesis. Number one, he was afraid of being rejected by the girls. Mm-hmm. Number two, even if he wasn't rejected and they did want to dance, now he's afraid he's going to look dumb dancing because he's afraid he's not a good dancer.
Right.
So he's afraid of both success and failure in this instance, not only rejection, but also if I don't get rejected, now I actually have to dance, white boy dance.
Fear stack.
And that is a fear stack. Mm-hmm. And so courage is necessary in every instance, at least a little bit. Unless, I think, Emilia, you talked about, unless you're just downright abrasive or that kind of thing.
I said, yeah, pretty much if you're arrogant and extraordinarily selfish, like this is to the narcissistic type end, if you will, of selfishness, not like the healthy, constructive version. You can still get your needs met, right? Because you can manipulate and contort yourself to get those needs met by a function of other people. But that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, we're talking about humility, courage, and vulnerability. Yeah. We're talking about, and the difference in this instance, sorry to interrupt you, love, is imagine, and I playfully joked about this in the event. I said, for the girls in the room, you know what I'm talking about. A guy just comes up and doesn't even ask and just brushes up on you in the club versus we always asked, like, hey, do you want to dance?
Right.
And
brushes. It's more like a park and nestle.
Park and grind. So that was the name of my favorite band in the 90s. I'm kidding. No, but seriously, I always prided myself on this. I always asked a girl if she wanted to dance. Mm-hmm. And that took more courage than someone who would just brush up on you and kind of force it on you. And I always disliked that aspect because I would hear all my friends that were girls complain about how no guys ask anymore. They just come up and grind on you. Yep. But the point of this is if you are abrasive and meeting your needs through selfish means, you're not going to ask anyone for consent. You're just going to go up and get your needs met. And I think that that's energetically not good. And so if you do want to meet your needs in a consensual, wonderful way in this world, it's going to require some level of courage. It took courage to DM Emilia and ask if she was in a relationship. It took courage to send her the first audio message. It took courage to ask her to be with me. Yeah. I kept sneaking off to write a little love letter. Episode 1 talks about our love story, but it takes courage to get your needs met. And in your corporate career or any sort of career, or even this podcast right now, it takes courage to share this story. It took a lot of courage for me to share that story about Kiki. There's all these fears that crop up. Yeah. Oh, well, would Kiki be okay with me sharing it? Oh, well, you know, and I have to just have courage and say, you know what, I'm going to share this. This is going to help people, and it's going to be worth it. And who cares? It's some little story, like, God forbid, and it's funny.
Well, our deepest exiled parts, our, innermost child elements of our psyche really do care, right? They really focus in on this biological imperative, this need to belong with other people. And so when we muster a moment of courage, not only, a really beautiful word that you just mentioned there is consent, but this inner child, this younger version of ourselves is and has been to some extent, whether it be little t, big T, or chronic T trauma, we have been socially traumatized in one way, shape, or form. And so this younger part of ourselves is incredibly hypervigilant for any element of rejection when it comes to others. And when it comes to our relationship, if your needs aren't getting met, you likely have the combination of a courage problem and a fear of consent. So when you express a need, when you were really younger, there was likely some element of rejection or humiliation socially that got experienced. And that was logged as a very, very deep survival risk memory for your younger version of yourselves. And essentially that built a belief, and I mentioned this in the event, that your needs don't matter. Your need for connection, your need for, even if it was asking for an ice cream, or your needs for asking for a hug when you were little from your dad, and being rejected, like those little tiny moments of social rejection were stored as memories. And those memories pervaded, or I would say expanded into your central nervous system. That central nervous system remembers. And so when you go and ask for your needs to be met in a moment of courage, you're trying to get consent that your partner is going to meet them. And what happens if they don't, right? That then will shake that belief system to the core of, am I important enough to have my needs met by my partner? Do my needs even matter in this big whole world that we live in, right? So it starts to shake the original foundations of what we believe to be important in our own world. And that's why not only is courage such a vital vessel to have those needs met, but it is wildly terrifying to our central nervous system to try to gain consent from our partner to explore, illuminate, and have those needs get met.
One of the things that I said at the opening of the event is, even when someone asks, hey, what's your favorite movie? There's a fear that comes up of, if I share that it's The Lion King, am I going to be laughed at?
Right.
Particularly men.
Well, people like me.
Oh, The Lion King?
What does that mean about you? Right.
What, really? The animated one? Grow up. All that. And that's what happens to young men when they're little. And the last thing a guy wants to do is get rejected in front of their buddies. So it's so interesting. I never realized how naive I was in this, but like I never cared that much about being rejected. I was just like, oh, I'll just go look stupid and I'll just go dance, because I always knew all girls really wanted, I think, and I would bounce this off you, is just to have fun. So I just decided to be the most fun. And so, that ended up, dancing with girls ended up being a byproduct of that. And other guys sat in the bar and acted cool. And when in reality, they're actually the most fearful, but they're acting the most quote unquote badass. It's so interesting. Yeah.
Hey everyone, this is Alicia. I wanted to take a second and give a shout out to Alan and Emilia. I've been listening to Next Level University podcast for a while now, and I've also joined in on group coaching and book club, and I've gained so much value from these. And recently, I have started listening to the Conscious Couple podcast, and then joined in on their monthly meetups with relationship talks. And from here, my wife and I decided to jump on a call with them, and we had a few questions. This has just been a great experience. They not only provided us with some great tips and things to implement, they also got back with us and to check and see how we were doing. And that has just meant so much to my wife and I. And I just really wanted to give a shout out and thank them so much. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast or join in on the relationship talks, I highly recommend that. And also just jump on a call with them and get to know them a little bit better, and just really lean into this resource. It's just been so valuable, and I really appreciate it.
So I'll bounce it back. Like, I can't speak for all women, but I definitely would say that fun is kind of having a good time while knowing that that good time won't lead you down an unsafe rabbit hole,
safety,
for lack of better
safe
words.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
entertainment.
All I cared about was facilitating a great experience, and then dancing. If it happened, that's great. If it didn't, whatever, I'll dance by myself. And so it's so interesting looking back from this frame of how much courage I actually might have had in comparison to what I thought. So for everyone out there watching or listening, in an intimate relationship, when you ask for a date night, or when you ask, hey, can we go do this? Or, hey, do you want to go to the movies with me? Or whatever it is, it always takes some level of courage, especially if you have rejections that are stacked. So where do you want to take this episode?
I was just going to say, so for anyone listening that feels, I want them to have in mind, right? Close your eyes if you need to. Have in mind one need. So target the need, identify the need. What is the one need that you have that you feel as though your relationship doesn't meet, or doesn't yet meet, or your partner hasn't met? So if Alan were to close his eyes, it would probably be 1 hour of R&R. And we're going to joke about that and use that as an example if you feel okay with that, love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the element of that need being met, right? It would be a very courageous moment for you to express, hey babe, I don't feel as though, and you have, right? We've talked about this on the podcast before. I really don't feel as though my one need to have 1 hour of R&R, I don't feel as though our relationship is supporting getting that done consistently. And we've talked about it. That took tremendous amount of courage.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, identify one area of your life where if you were to ask yourself and be brutally honest with yourself, what is one need that you have that is not getting met? And it's not getting met specifically in your relationship.
So just to unlayer this, the responsibility is on me to get 1 hour of R&R. And Emilia and I live together, and we have a very enmeshed life on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel like Emilia was helping support me in meeting that need.
Yes, because I am always productive.
Yeah, she's
to a fault
the
of
most
his
productive
needs.
human being I've ever
Conflicts
met in my
right
entire
there.
life. And I told her there's something very important to me, which is after a certain time. So we try to get to bed by 11 so that we can wake up early and be productive. Mornings are important to you. Evenings are important to me. Both are important to both, but not to the same extent.
Right.
And if it's late at night, we get home from the gym late. Let's say we cut work late, let's just say, hypothetically, which hopefully doesn't happen tonight. But then we get to the gym late. Then we get home from the gym late.
Yeah.
Then we don't get an hour of R&R. If I only get a half an hour of rest and relaxation and then I have to get up and grind again, I get so crabby.
And here's the thing. It wouldn't be an issue if you and I were okay with trading off. Let's say, oh, well, let's just scrap the gym. You and I have such high standards for ourselves when it comes to the promises that we make to ourselves. We keep them.
Yeah.
And we have such high integrity within that. So it's kind of like a train effect. When the one part of the train stops, the rest of the cars pile up, and other people might not necessarily have that level of standard or integrity.
Let's not go to the gym.
Right, scrap
or
the gym.
Let's not
Boom,
go
just
to bed
make
at 11.
But that's not us, right?
Exactly.
So that's why that need, it's on the struggle bus.
You know what usually gets done is instead of an hour of R&R, we get the workout in and we get to bed on time. The R&R is what takes the hit.
Mm.
And that is why I had to come to Emilia and say, sweetheart, you're trying to be productive at the end of the day, and I'm done. Like, I woke up, from the moment I woke up to now, I've been productive and constructive. Build the self, build the family, build the business. That's what the 30s are about for me. Build the self, build the family, build the business. Build the self, build the family, build the business. You know, an hour before bedtime comes around, I'm done building. I'm done constructing.
Yeah, you and I have had conversations courageously about how you and I are in very different periods of our businesses and in our lives. So the way in which you need R&R is very different in terms of what I need. So those are conflicting.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off, but I wanted to add that.
Emilia's biggest need is adventure and nature. So nature. My biggest need is R&R. Sometimes those can conflict. So everyone out there watching or listening, think about your biggest need. What is your biggest need, and is your partner supporting it? And if not, courage time.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Not only courage time, but this is one question that we asked in the event. 0 to 10, how uncomfortable is it for you if you were to imagine that need and expressing what your partner's behaviors are doing that are preventing or contributing to the prevention of that need being met? How uncomfortable, 0 to 10, would it be for you to express that innermost truth and feelings of its impact? How uncomfortable would that be for you? When we asked that in the event, it was like 12 out of 10, because we're so terrified, going back to what we said previously, to bring that up.
Selfish.
It's terrifying.
It feels selfish.
And we have all these meetings and all that happy jazz around it. So yeah, it's terrifying, but that's where we start.
For the more growth-oriented partner out there, it feels selfish because you're so used to not having your needs met that it feels... So right now I coach 28 individuals right now, between the team and business coaching and relationship talks coaching. And it's been hundreds over the years. One thing that I've noticed is that there's a spectrum between selfish and selflessness. If you're far on the end of selfless, you're basically taking tons of responsibility, not just for yourself, but for others, and your needs often get neglected.
Wildly neglecting
And
needs.
usually it's because you unconsciously surrounded yourself with people who are so used to having their needs met. Everyone right now out there watching or listening, think about someone, close your eyes, think if you're driving, don't do this. Think about someone who you think is very selfish. They always get their needs met. They're so good at getting their needs met.
And not in like a constructive
not
way.
necessarily in a constructive way,
Okay.
although they seem like some people are very sneaky about this.
Mm-hmm.
I had a person that I had dated in the past that was world class at getting her needs met,
Mm-hmm.
world class at it. And little did I know is I was world class at helping her meet her needs.
Yeah.
And now I understand the downside of that.
It's
so
like parasitic element.
If you're out there right now and you're the more growth-oriented partner who has more self-efficacy and self-belief, most likely you're taking on responsibility for your partner's needs, and your needs have gotten neglected
as a result.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm not saying to swing all the way to the selfish end, but if you're too far on the selfless end, you're the martyr and you need to be careful. That's what I would end with is courage. It's time for courage. And it's time to express one need to your partner that you feel is not being supported.
Yeah. And in the event, we gave, some tangible, practical examples and tools and tips. And that's why the benefit of going to those events is we encourage you to actually put yours, what that would be in your actual life, your practical life, what that would be in the chat. And so that was awesome. We're so grateful for the people that had come and how vulnerable they were at communicating what that was. And so anyone that is, I would absolutely validate what you said, love. Anyone that is struggling with courage, they need to have someone in their corner that helps to build that ladder, that courageous ladder for transformation to happen. Because ultimately, the through line of this podcast episode is really that everyone has needs. And it's not just the basic, I have a roof over my head, I have clothes on my back, right? Like I'm able to feed myself. You have more than 5 basic needs. You have 68 plus basic human needs that are in everyone. But yet we are so wildly neglectful to what those needs are.
What's the research for the 68 basic human needs?
I had mentioned how I really love Tim Fletcher's work around this.
Yep.
Trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive, and specifically around developmental trauma. But just basic needs, we tend to think it's like 5. Okay, if you're, roof over your head, clothes on your back, and I provide for you, a lot of emotionally immature, trauma insensitive, and emotionally unaware, they won't think that you have more than those needs. As a matter of fact, you'll get gaslit for those needs.
And what's the long-term detriment to not learning how to meet your own needs in a constructive, healthy, growth-oriented way?
My goodness.
Because I do think there's an overswing here. Like, if you're only worried about your needs, you'll end up selfish and unfulfilled.
Well, here's the thing. Number one, you'll be constantly exploited at the expense of other people's
wait.
that.
Hold on. If you're overly selfish, what's the downside? And if you're overly selfless, I think I got confused there. So if someone is not good at meeting their own needs in a constructive way,
get consistently exploited by others.
Okay. And if they are very selfish,
what the long-term detriment of that, they will likely have a shorter lifespan. They will likely engage in more risky behaviors that will likely end their life sooner, or they will have a multitude of health risks that impact their quality, longevity, and sustainability of their life. Their relationships suffer. Like, it's just downhill.
What about the side of, I think the overly selfish end of the spectrum is actually deeply lack of fulfillment. You don't feel like you have purpose. It's all about you, which I think is wildly unfulfilling and unhealthy as well.
Yeah, it brings a giant gap that you can never actually fully fill.
Can you go down to the long-term detriments of being overly selfish?
The overly selfish long-term implications are
people find you out eventually.
Not only people find you out, so you'll have a consistent churn of relationships because you're essentially the user and abuser of relationships. So you'll churn over and have attrition
and not have a meaningful life
because of that one element of the churn of the relationships, and you're more parasitic in nature. Your quality of life will tank because you're constantly going to try to cope with the fact that people that you exploit will eventually leave you or lash out at you, villainize you. Then you'll cope in it in maladaptive ways that aren't constructive, that ultimately lead to a detriment of health. So not only will you be unfulfilled, but your health will plummet in one way or another. So either end of the spectrum leads to a poor quality of life as a result of the poor relationships that are there, and ultimately the coping mechanisms that you try to engage with, or the risky behaviors that you try to inherently help fill the void or help you numb out what life feels like for you.
And to make this really practical for anyone out there listening, if you're an overly giving, you probably found unconsciously a parasitic partner who's overly taking.
Mm-hmm.
And what needs to happen for the relationship to grow is the overly parasitic person needs to learn how to actually have purpose beyond their own needs, and the overly giving person has to learn how to rein it the fuck in. And I'm being playful because I'm talking about my old self.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to actually make sure your needs are being met, honor and create boundaries. And obviously most of our listeners are on the overly generous side, otherwise they'd hate us. Being playful. But before we jump here, Relationship Talks coaching is going to help you tremendously. Whichever end of the spectrum you're on will help you get centered and constructive. Reassess this from a constructive lens.
Yes. In addition, one of the biggest things that we have seen with the conscious couples and conscious singles community is that there's usually one partner that tends to be the more growth-oriented partner. And what that ends up resulting in is a little bit of, how there tends to be like an age gap in relationships. Well, there tends to be a growth gap. And that growth gap usually drives couples apart rather than together in terms of the love train. So we don't want you and your partner, if you're listening to this episode, if you're listening to this podcast, likely you are the growth-oriented person and you have had some degree of a conflict in your relationship that has been a byproduct of this growth gap. Our next Relationship Talks event, number 44, is going to be on February 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard. It's going to be about how to get on that same page with your partner about growth and personal growth and all of that, which we talk about, right? Getting better, growing together and not apart. And that there's some really important practical applications around the growth gap that Alan and I want to introduce to the conscious couples community that is going to help couples grow together instead of just, why are we getting in all these conflicts that are unnecessary, but they're a byproduct of the person that has the higher velocity in their growth.
So everyone out there, if you feel like you and your partner are not on the same page about personal growth, like, have you even had the personal growth conversation?
Likely not, because we don't know that it has to exist,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. When Emilia and I first got together, I told her that my mission is the most important thing to me, and the man that's in front of you is a byproduct of that mission. So you will always be the first person. You'll always be my top priority when it comes to human beings, but my mission will always be first, because that's who I am. That's what's built this man that you have fallen in love with. And so her and I got on the same page about growth very early on. The point of this podcast and the point of our relationship is personal and professional growth. And so if you haven't gotten on the same page with your partner and you feel like they are reluctant to grow at the same pace as you or vice versa, this is the event for you.
For sure. I'm super excited for this one because I do feel as though this is one of the events that no one really knew consciously that they needed, but desperately do.
Yeah, it's the one thing that could change everything.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, sweetheart. Strong one.
I appreciate you, my love.
Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. As always, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.
We'll talk to you next time.
Me. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.